Okay. One day we'll have an Indian woman. I don't like the American accent too much.
How do you like Indian accent?
But that's my bias. Yeah, I prefer it was an Oxford accent. Anyway. So thank you again. I know people have very busy lives. It's a busy time. So you're taking time off, all of you, 2 people here at Tushita and 4 of you online. Very kind of you. Very kind indeed. Yeah, I appreciate. I'm sure Buddhas and Bodhisattvas appreciate. Yeah, it's said actually that they, especially if we have taken refuge and have some faith in them, then for sure they are, they are helping us in some way because that's their job, You could say that's their job to help us. That's why they became Buddhas, Bodhisattvas. So somehow they are creating the circumstances and etc. inner and outer for us to benefit even from the very simple kind of teachings or sharings that I give here. Good. So posture is important. Yeah, upright is good. Well, of course, as you know, probably some teachers say that for some people lying down is also okay, especially if they're very tired or have some problem with with their back or something. But upright is good because as the Dalai Lama once said, one needs tremendous confidence to engage in this Mahayana practice because the vision is so vast, To even think about, to seriously think about the Mahayana motivation is kind of almost scaring because we're willing to, kind of really take on that responsibility or pretend, at least in the beginning, to take on the responsibility for others' happiness, other beings without limit, So that's quite an undertaking, no? So we need courage for that. We need great confidence. So the upright posture is good for that. We're not bowing down in the wrong kind of way before in front of this great task that we have, And even if we don't consider ourselves part of the so-called Mahayana tradition, still we need confidence. Because why? Because we are dealing with the fundamental ignorance, the 3 poisonous states of mind, as they call it, ignorance, attachment, anger. So these delusions, these disturbing states of mind, they're very powerful, as we know, so powerful. So we need skill and courage, confidence to work with them, deal with them. Depending on what level of the path we're on, we might even be able to transform their energies into the path. Whatever, we do need confidence for all the levels of dealing with our minds, whether it's basic Theravada level, Mahayana level, or Vajrayana level. So that's one aspect of the posture. And the other is, of course, the front of the body. If you look at it, it's open in this upright posture. So although it can be very difficult sometimes, yeah, I'm sure, we do need to open our heart and communicate with others, help others as much as we can. Of course, we all have different styles of communicating and, we're not all the same, of course, but we can all have that at least open-hearted attitude towards others. And we don't have to be talking or acting, meaning doing things all the time in order to benefit others. We can quietly be carrying on, helping others. So opening the heart, having the front of the body open, does not mean we have to be hyperactive. No way. We can be very quietly powerfully motivating and preparing ourselves to be able to help other people more. Yeah. Anyway, the posture. Excuse me. Sorry, I've been breathing in Delhi air outside in the middle of town, close to the middle of town for a while. So yeah, we need confidence and we need open-heartedness for courage and this warmth, love, loving kindness, compassion. So essential and so sometimes overlooked and forgotten in our modern culture of speed and somehow subtle aggression and, yeah, ambition, competitiveness, the kindness, the love gets left behind. Even mothers and fathers sometimes don't give enough time and attention and love to their children because, you know, they're also so busy and doing this, that, and the other. So the posture reminds us of the essentials of what makes perhaps a meaningful life: courage, confidence, and on the other hand, great warmth and love, compassion, the willingness to take on the, you know, open up to others who need our help, really need our help. You can see that so clearly. This is all part of our motivation, by the way, motivating for the session, creating the right state of mind. I say others need our help. It's not only with, you know, resources, but if we look at how, you know, certain very important people with responsibility, leaders of countries, what they are saying, how they're behaving, you know, they need help. They need help to, you know, set their mind straight and, you know, think things out properly, because their actions affect hundreds of thousands of people, maybe millions of people. So, you know, whether we look at that or whether we look at children who are starving or dying or whatever it is, we see that the living beings need help. From the top to the bottom, from the presidents and prime ministers down to the people sleeping out in the road in the cold weather, you know, whatever. Everybody needs some kind of help. So the only way to do that, to be of any help, even to stop our own minds from feeling helpless, we need to really tame our minds, work with it, strengthen it, with the appropriate skillful methods presented in the Buddha Dharma. So, for example, we can start with calming the mind, making it a little bit calm, soft, and balanced through the breath awareness practice. Yeah. Which not only can help us be a little bit more centered, but it helps us to not take our thoughts so seriously and not chase after them and not go up and down according to the thoughts we're having. We can just observe and let them go and come back to the breath as though we were, you know, gazing at fast moving clouds in the sky or ripples of water on a large body of water, just the ripples, the little waves, or, you know, bubbles on water, coming, dissolving. We can have a kind of a soft attitude, not uptight, not stressed out. So let the body be still. Let the mind and body be somewhat relaxed, relatively relaxed. Fully relaxed is not easy, so however much we can. And then also attentive, awake, not to let the relaxation make us drowsy and sleepy. So being aware of the breath, the sensation of it at the nostrils, letting go with the out breath, dissolving with the out breath, you could say, in a very calm, clear, non-ambitious fashion. There is nothing to achieve as such. Just be very kind and gentle, but precise with oneself. Thoughts come? No problem. Recognize, let go, gently come back to the breath. In a relaxed way, without impatience, without any aggression involved. Okay. Thank you. It's very hard to sit still and do nothing, isn't it? Even with the body, it's hard to not do anything, let alone the mind. But that's it's showing us something, showing us what the present condition is of our minds and our bodies, which is a good thing. So that when the Buddha says that we are suffering or we are experiencing dukkha, then we can begin to understand what he means. Just to sit peacefully, observing breath and not being distracted. So difficult for our untamed mind. And one interesting etymological definition of dukkha and sukha, sukha, of course, in Hindi means happiness, bliss. So one definition of dukkha is ka. The ka refers to space, spaciousness, space. And the do refers to crowded space, space that has become crowded. Like water that was peaceful and now is boiling, or like an ocean in a storm. It's become crowded with thoughts, conceptualizations, elaborations is a word sometimes used in English translations. So that is a state of unease, of dis-ease. There's no ease left. Whereas sukha is like open space, spaciousness, without the crowd. Without the crowd of thoughts, hopes, expectations, all of that. Without the hopes and fears, images, the conceptualizations we keep on making, all of that. All of that is absent in sukha. So this short practice shows us how much we are suffering from dukkha on that level. So when there is dukkha, when there is this crowdedness, there is no possibility of spaciousness and ease. It's like being in a very congested, like I was just in the metro an hour ago. So it's like congested. It wasn't like a big suffering experience, but after a while it's kind of tiring, and we don't even notice the kind of input, the kind of effect it has on our body mind. Only later, when we feel how nice to get off the metro and into the air, crowded space is a kind of disharmony. We need space. So to create the cause of happiness, you could say, to create the causes of space, let's say, if we're using this line of argument, we have to engage in actions that do not disturb the mind, do not create this crowded feeling, but create a sense of ease and openness. So that this can be a little interactive, from the previous sessions, what have you understood to be some of the factors, one of the main ones, the simple ones I've mentioned, that create lack of happiness? What creates lack of happiness? This is a question to you. Yeah, 8 worldly dharmas, and what else creates? So by saying what prevents happiness, we're also asking what makes us suffer, right? What makes us suffer? So what makes us suffer? What's the cause of suffering in Buddhism? What's the second noble truth? Second noble truth is ignorance and
Attachment,
attachment.
anger,
Anger. Okay. So let's say we don't need to mention all of the delusions, but that's one aspect of it. Delusions and karma. Yeah. Delusion and karma is given as the cause. Sometimes in the Theravada tradition, as I heard again today in a conference, they often just say craving. But that is, in a sense, interesting and good. But in the Mahayana, we speak more. We give, I think, more, more expansive explanation. Craving comes within attachment, and it's also a form of self-grasping ignorance. So I think the definition of delusion and karma is good. That's what our teachers have given us, and I think that makes a lot of sense. If there were no delusions, here meaning disturbing conceptions, disturbing emotions, like ignorance, anger, attachment, then there would be no mistaken or unwholesome karma. So what are we saying? What else have we mentioned before? What are the actions we need to avoid if we want to create happiness? This we should know in our sleep. Huh? Now, what are hey? But what are the actions to be avoided? On the teachings on karma, what are the actions to be avoided? The basic list that they give. Come on, folks. Wake up.
Killing, lying,
Thank you.
stealing, coveting. I don't remember the exact sequence,
Oh, no,
Kabirji.
you're an old
But-
student. You should
yeah.
definitely know this in your sleep, okay? If you're asked to dream what this is, you should know. So what are the three unwholesome actions of the body? Hello, are you still there?
I am there, Kabirji.
What are the three unwholesome actions of the body that are given in this list? First of all, how many unwholesome actions do we speak of? Do you remember?
I number I can
10.
Kabirji.
So there are 10. Three of the body, 4 of the speech, 3 of the mind. Can you remember 3 of the body? I think you mentioned 2 already.
I cannot sort them out under these heads all of a sudden, Kabirji. I'll have to go back to my notes. I'm so sorry.
This
But
is a black mark against your name in our notebook.
I know. I'm so sorry, so
You
sorry.
already mentioned 2, I think, in what you're
Acha,
actually,
killing.
body. Killing, yeah.
Huh?
Then
Lying would be under speech, right? No.
people come to libraries and what do?
Stealing
Stealing.
and
And
sexual.
number 3, it happens a lot in the very extreme aspect of it happens a lot in wartime. The third unwholesome action of the body, not killing. Killing, stealing we had. Third one, anybody?
Kabirji, someone mentioned sexual misconduct.
Someone, meaning?
Yeah, I think
Someone online.
yeah, that
okay.
was me.
Sexual misconduct, good.
Apurva.
What are the 4 connected with speech? 4 unwholesome actions.
Harsh speech, I remember, Kabirji, definitely.
Very good. And you mentioned another one just now earlier.
Lying.
Good. Then what we often do in chai shops when we're not thinking.
gossip,
right? Gossip, 3.
Yes.
And then what do politicians often do? Apart from they do the other 3, of course, but what do they do when they want to, advance? What do they, if they see 2 people are friendly and that's not in their interest, the 2 people or, whatever, what do they do with their speech?
They try to create differences, Kabirji.
Good. So what is that called? Somebody very
Yeah,
good.
exactly.
Who is that? Maybe Neil. Okay, divisive speech. ठीक है ना?
Yes.
So lying, harsh speech, divisive speech, idle gossip. Okay, what are the three unwholesome actions of the mind? Mental, which actually are kind of fueling everything else in a way. What is the first one? Anybody?
Wrong
Not usually given as the first one, usually the last, but doesn't matter. Okay, wrong view.
Coveting, Kaviji?
Yeah,
No.
covetousness, which comes within the greed aspect or the attachment. And then the other one?
Malice.
Good, thank you. Who was that? Our friend from Mexico. Well done. You have defeated Indian students. And it's well done. Mexico 1, India 0. Okay, so you see, if I mention like a sport, then people will wake up here. Otherwise, because we like sport. It's not. So yeah, it is malice, hostility, ill will. This is what is happening. Ill will, and wrong views, as Vishad Mai here said. So, why are we mentioning these 10? Anybody remember why we're mentioning these 10? Well, they are negative karma, killing, stealing, sex. That is unwholesome karma. So what? What's the problem with unwholesome karma?
You were talking about happiness, Kabirji, how to, as in that context, you mentioned these things.
So-
How can we create happiness, probably?
Why am I mentioning the 10 unwholesome actions?
to avoid these 10 wholesome actions.
So why am I mentioning, Nandita, why am I mentioning unwholesome actions?
Because if we don't engage in those unwholesome actions, we'll
Good, I hope you're getting
we'll find happiness.
should have your orange juice every day. It's going to be good for you. Yeah, okay. So unwholesome karma creates suffering. Suffering in the ways that we are taught in the teachings on karma, which is very deep teachings on karma, how it creates, this throwing karma, throws us into a negative rebirth, even unwholesome rebirth, and it becomes a habit. That is the other terrible thing about karma, negative karma. It becomes a habit. So it's very easy then in future lives to kill, steal, and do all the rest. I mean, think about it, how terribly pernicious, how destructive that is. Automatically we do things, often not realizing we're doing it or not caring or not even thinking it's negative. Why? Because it's such a strong habit. It's just a habit. Yeah. So, and then there are other two effects of karma. What are they? We've had the main throwing effect into a life, into a negative rebirth. But even if we're human, we have the habit, say, of killing. What are the other two things we can experience as a result of negative karma? The other two results out of the four? Could you be a little more elaborate? Because, yeah, all of this is suffering. But by killing, what is the result similar to the experience?
We might get pushed into ourselves.
No, that's the first one. That's the throwing karma. Can throw us into lower realms. The second one is habit. What are the third and fourth? Meaning what? We experience what we have made others experience. So if we have killed others, we experience illness, being killed, short life. These things can happen. If it's very, very strong action of killing we've engaged in, then it could be even somebody, we get killed, we get harmed badly, or have short lives and so forth. And usually if killing is there a lot, it can often be associated with anger. So then anger creates so many problems in life. And sicknesses. What's the fourth result that can accrue from karma? Environmental effect. Okay, so if we're killed, environment tends to be a harsh one for us. It doesn't support us well in many ways, depending again on the severity of the karma. Whereas, for example, if we've been very loving and kind and generous, then our environment is like that for us, by and large. But because we've all created mixed karma, most people don't always have a harsh environment. Well, some people do, of course. But let's say not everyone has a good environment all the time. Even if, you often have periods when you have to live or stay in a place which is a little bit not so nice or dirty or dangerous or whatever. Depends. Okay, so what we're saying is these 10 unwholesome actions, which are simple, basic dharma, but so easy to ignore and to ignore their karmic effects. So these are causes of suffering, deep suffering. We're never going to experience happiness. And as they say in the teachings, we won't even hear the word happiness if we keep on engaging in these 10, especially the ones that are throwing us into the lower realm. But also think of, you can think of certain rebirths, human rebirths also, where the being doesn't experience any happiness whatsoever from the time of birth until their death. They don't experience any happiness, any pleasure. Their life is just one long drawn out or short drawn out suffering, hunger, thirst, fear, violence, etc., etc. Think about it. It's very hard to contemplate, actually, if we haven't gone through it, and we haven't. Pretty well-adjusted people, by and large. We haven't had non-stop suffering, since we were born. So, yeah, we have to avoid those 10 unwholesome actions. And if we think of their opposites, then that is the cause of at least mundane happiness, temporary happiness. What would we need to create the happiness of nirvana, the peace of nirvana, let's say? What would we need to do for that? Are the 10 wholesome, is avoiding the 10 unwholesome actions enough? No, why not?
He said wisdom.
Huh?
You need wisdom for that.
So one of the negative actions is wrong views. If you practice the opposite of wrong views, isn't that wisdom? Because here wrong views also denotes wrong actions based on the wrong view, wrong understanding. But yeah, you're right. They do say that to actually create the cause of nirvana, you need something more, or a slightly deeper kind of wisdom than what is meant by the opposite of wrong views here, perhaps, or a deeper application of it. So what would be the trainings you need to engage in? How many beings are spoken of in the path, as mentioned by Atisha and Lama Tsongkhapa? How many categories of beings are spoken of? No, not that one. Yeah. तो बोलो क्या है? Small capacity, yeah. Medium capacity, and great capacity. So what is one of the actions, what is the main practice of the middling or medium capacity person in the Lamrim traditions, as we have been explaining them? So what are the practices to gain nirvana?
Practice of all the basic the practice that we just talked about, accumulating.
On top of that, what are the 3 higher trainings, please? Remember, the middling capacity person practices the 3 higher trainings. Remember?
Practice practice of generosity.
3 higher training. That's your thinking of 6 perfections, maybe. Haji. Huh? Huh. Shil, Samadhi, Pragya. Actually, by going to interfaith meetings, one hears that. Because when the person talks about Buddhism, they often quote that. Shil, Samadhi, Pragya. Shil, Samadhi. So what is Shil, Samadhi, Pragya?
Shil is the single-pointed self. One has to do with ethics,
Huh?
meditation,
Huh?
ethics.
What is Shil? Ethics. Meaning? Basically, basic meaning of ethics in Buddhism.
Morality, Kabir ji.
Arey bhai, wohi to hai ethics, but what is the meaning of it? What do we do in ethics? What does ethics mean? Huh?
Each food part. Each food part.
Huh?
In ethics, we actually take care of.
Excuse
In
me.
ethics,
Just a sec, Nandita.
Study, reflect, meditate.
That's not ethics.
Shil, Samadhi. About the 5 shil.
We're talking about Shil. You can explain that also. That's good. Yeah.
One shil is
The 5. Yash, resident volunteer, is going to mention the 5, the Panchil that even Jawaharlal Nehru spoke of. Way. Yeah. Bolo.
not lying, not killing,
Yeah.
no sexual misconduct,
Right.
no stealing,
No, we've had killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, then lying, and the last.
No consumption of property.
No coke and rum
But
too
I think
much. Yeah.
The skills that you talk about are the 10 non-virtuous actions.
Also, yeah, very good, to avoid the 10 unwholesome action. Yeah. And also, yeah, in general, not harming others is shield. It's a very vast topic, but that's okay. What's the second thing you mentioned?
samadhi.
What is samadhi?
Meditative concentration.
Okay, meditative concentration.
Again, 2 types, shamatha and vipassana.
No.
Yes.
Not shamatha and vipassana. Vipassana is,
Just shamatha.
that is, so what is the third?
That's it.
Pragya. That is discernment, discerning wisdom. That's insight, vipassana. So these are very basic things we should know. And I think we've gone over them, but of course, sometimes people are not in those classes or not taking notes, so we forget all these things. So Shil Samadhi Pragya. And what does the proper practice of Shil Samadhi Pragya lead to?
Each nirvana. And then
Nirvana. Yeah, very clear, Nirvana. But that's not enough, right? So what are the practices of the great being, of the great capacity person?
in addition to these practices, there is a practice of six perfect,
Based on?
based on moving.
How do you, before the teachings on the 6 perfections, what are we taught? What's the essence of the great vehicle of Mahayana?
Giving without further.
So what's the root of that? And what's the root of bodhicitta? In the initial stage? Yeah, it's part of it. So what I was thinking was equanimity, compassion, and then based on that we develop bodhicitta, and then the 6 perfections. And of course, then the 6 perfections being practiced together with the great wisdom, realizing emptiness. So then it becomes a course for Buddhahood. So we should know this, that the small capacity person, what are they trying to do? Small capacity person,
Trying to achieve better because
as a better rebirth as a human. Good. Middling capacity is trying to do what?
trying to achieve better.
Great capacity person, Buddhahood. Good. So we should know these things. So that, of course, is all leading to great, happiness. So all those practices are leading to happiness. They're the cause of happiness. So what is now? What is preventing us experience the happiness of Buddhahood, mainly Buddhahood. What is preventing us achieve Buddhahood?
Selfish.
Yeah, self-cherishing attitude. Okay, lack of the great compassion, bodhicitta. What is preventing us achieve nirvana? Yeah, you could. Yeah, again, the self-grasping. You could say, yeah, the wish. Not having morality, not having a concentrated mind, not having wisdom. So that's going to make nirvana impossible. What is going to make the small capacity person's path also impossible? Remember, they are trying to get a good human rebirth through practicing virtue and through watching karma carefully, avoiding the 10 non-virtuous actions. What is going to prevent them, basically, from achieving a good human rebirth?
Not following the 10 virtuous actions.
Yeah, not following the 10 virtuous actions and being, as you had said earlier, caught up in
Negative behavior,
the 8 worldly feelings. Yeah. If we're caught up in the 8 worldly feelings, let alone Buddhahood or nirvana, we won't even attain a good human rebirth. We might attain some kind of human rebirth, but it wouldn't have all the circumstances necessary to engage in the dharma. It wouldn't be called what precious human life. We would lack a lot of things. And as we see, most human life on this planet is from a dharma point of view, very miserable, and actually obviously miserable, just looking at it. And if you doubt the words, just go and look. Just we can open our eyes and look at how people live, how they're living, how they're thinking, how they're behaving. And maybe we don't even have to look at them. We look at ourselves. How am I thinking, living, behaving? Suffering, It's a mess. It's a confusion. Yeah. We can't sit still for 2 minutes. We can't, avoid having unvirtuous thoughts. We can't avoid, engaging in our habits. Some of which are excellent, of course, maybe very good habits, and others aren't. Mental habits, verbal habits, physical habits. Okay, does that make sense? If that makes sense, we can carry on. Let's talk about habits. What do you understand as a habit? What for you is a habit? What does it mean? And what is the cause in general of habits?
Repeating a pattern of actions.
Yeah, that's good. A pattern of actions that kind of repeats itself, right? Would you say, Neil, we have much control over habits?
Personally, no.
Yeah, personally, good, honest answer. Personally, no. So what creates that? What's the cause of these habitual patterns, as we call them? Habit patterns.
A sort of a conditioning, maybe? I'm not sure.
Well, yeah, some kind of conditioning, that's for sure. If we weren't conditioned, why would we keep on behaving in a certain way? If in the street, depends where you are, but often in the street, if you approach a dog, of course, if the dog approaches you and jumps on you very playfully, it's different. But if you approach a dog wanting to be kind to it, even in the Mahabodhi Stupa in Bodh Gaya, some of them flinch a bit. They flinch, with fear, just before you touch them or stroke them. So that would be due to conditioning, right? Somebody harmed them in the past. Somebody wasn't kind to them in the past, or they have some fear due to some kind of conditioning. And of course, for Buddhist perspective, could be from past lives, conditioning, fear, because of being mistreated, right? And that causes them to flinch. And then once you stroke them a little, then some of them become much more at ease very quickly. Some even then still a little bit disturbed. So this is conditioning, isn't it? It's so clear. Conditioning. If you are brought up in a certain way, let's say in a certain way in Russia, or a certain way in America, or a certain way in India, you see things, you see life in a certain way. I was watching cricket yesterday. A whole bunch of family members had come over to aunt's apartment. We are watching dinner. At the end of dinner, the India-New Zealand game was still going on. I don't know if any of you descend to that level to watch one-day internationals. So then, at one point, New Zealand were playing quite well, you know. And I guess the meaning of sport is to play and to even enjoy it sometimes. But I would see that even when it was obvious that they couldn't make the runs to win, in other words, New Zealand could not win, India would win. Even then, when the New Zealanders hit a six, there would be no applause. There would be no happy faces. The Indian would just look neutral or glum, you know, players as well as crowd. So what is this? This is conditioning, right? You're an Indian team supporter, so the other guy hits a six. Even though he's going to lose the match, you don't want to smile or applaud it because it's a good shot or whatever. What is this? It's actually bad sportsmanship, I think, and even some families members agreed. But if an Indian hits a six, wow, then you should see the camera panning in on the Indian crowd, the Indian spectators, behaving, I would say, like children. You know? So this is conditioning. They're just simple example of conditioning, but very instructive. If you're like this, then you behave like that. If you're that team, you know, you've been conditioned to applause and jump up and down and hug each other when, you know, your team member hits a half century or a century. But if the other team hits a good shot, even though they're on the losing side, you can't applaud. It's beyond you. How pathetic these habitual patterns can make us, no? Michelle? Oh, okay. So that's one example of habitual pattern. It's not a very dangerous one. What would be dangerous if we were very envious, or who is criticizing people behind their back, or just being very stupid, harsh speech, and in the worst cases, killing animals, people even. You know? There are people who enjoy killing. There are people who enjoy stealing. I mean, they do it. Whether they enjoy or not, can't say always, but they enjoy. There are people who engage in sexual misconduct. You know? So all these things, they're habits. They become habits due to our habituation with them. Even meditation is called habituating the mind to what is wholesome. That's also a habit, but it's a good habit. But you'll notice in the higher teachings in Buddhism, they speak of non-meditation. At the highest level, even meditation, the habit of meditation has to be given up. It has to be something much more, I don't know, spontaneous and non-effortful. Yeah. But in the beginning, yeah, we have to create this habitual pattern of goodness, which is very useful because it creates positive karma, it creates happiness. Yeah. So habits are very pernicious. They go very deep. Let me read a little bit just to give you another angle on it. The Tibetan word for an animal is tudro. Tudro. Tu means hunched. Dro means walking. Tudros are four-legged animals who walk hunched over. Their most sensitive sense organs are their nostrils, which they use to smell their way through the world. That is a precise description of habitual behavior, which is a manifestation of animal instinct. Habitual patterns allow you to look no further than 3 steps ahead of you. You're always looking at the ground and you never look up at the bright blue sky or the mountain peaks. You fail to smile and rejoice at the mist rising off the glaciers. In fact, anything above your shoulder level is embarrassing. That sense of being just, tunnel vision. If you're an Indian supporter, you don't clap or show happiness when somebody hits a beautiful shot from the other side. Whereas if your guy by mistake scores a 6 with a mistaken shot, very good. This habitual. You can't go beyond your own little box. When a Tudro type person who is filled with habitual patterns looks at a warrior, he might feel that the warrior has a very tedious existence. How in the name of heaven and earth can the warrior be so upright and awake? A Tudro, a four-legged, hunched, unhead and shouldered person may feel very sorry for the warrior because the warrior has to stand on 2 feet and maintain good head and shoulders. Quite possibly such a sympathizer might make a gift of a chair to the warrior, thinking that a chair would make the warrior happy. But a warrior never needs to take time off. Trying to relax by slouching or indulging in habitual patterns only produces schizophrenia. You're such a nice boss and such a good humorous person at the office that the minute you come home, you forget everything. You turn on your TV, beat your wife, you send your children to their rooms telling them that you need peace and quiet. One wonders what kind of peace and quiet such a person is looking for. It seems rather he's looking for pain, hellish life. So the process of freeing yourself from arrogance and cutting off habitual tendencies is a very drastic measure, but it's very necessary in order to help others in this world. Then he gives an interesting example of a politician, statesman who was called Uthant, whom I remember from childhood. It was a word we heard somewhere. He was the Secretary General of the UN in the 50s, 60s, maybe. He exemplified how to be a warrior, how to help others without arrogance. He was highly educated. He was Burmese. He was thoroughly soaked in the presentation. Burmese or Thai? Anyway, Burmese. He conducted the affairs of the UN with dignity, and he was so soft and gentle. Therefore, people felt in awe of him. They felt his power. They admired what he said and the decisions he made. He was one of the great statesmen of this century, 20th century, great example of someone who has overcome habitual patterns. Habitual patterns are dangerous and destructive. They prevent you from seeing what over here calls the great eastern sun, meaning a vision of openness, spaciousness, courage, and so forth. When habitual patterns constantly operate, you can't raise up your head and shoulders at all. You're down there looking down, looking for this and that. You're more concerned with the flies sitting on your cup than with the great sun that is coming up. Sometimes in our house, one fly comes in. It's no exaggeration. It will become a big deal, like there's an enemy drone attack or something. A fly comes into the house. Hi, Mastai. How to kill the fly. Big deal. Whereas you go to sometimes, I've been in villages where there are flies all over the place, everywhere. While you're eating, and people are just kind of shooing them away a bit, but no one's talking about the flies. Again, habit. If you're used to flies, you're used to flies. If you're not, then one fly coming in is a big deal. You look for your tennis racket, which kills them or whatever, however you use to kill them, and it's quite sad, really. It's quite funny also, the way people can get so upset over one fly. Anyway, they are kind of destructive because you're not the flies, I mean the habitual pattern, just destroys your peace of mind. I mean, you'll never be able to go into an Indian village of certain times. Of course, then you won't know how your countrymen live. And one fly comes in your house and it's a big deal. So then your life is going to be limited. So these habitual patterns are destructive. And of course, all the other big ones like looking down on people who have lower jobs than you, different color than you, different caste than you, different class, all these things we have, isn't it? Which make us behave differently to certain people and therefore stop us from developing renunciation in both ways, renouncing the 8 worldly dharmas as well as Strumpa's definition of renunciation, the warrior, which is a very beautiful definition, which is that the renunciation for the warrior is giving up anything that is a barrier between yourself and others. Isn't that beautiful? Giving up anything that acts as a barrier between yourself and others. So you could say the Indian spectators create a big barrier between themselves and enjoyment and the other team. You can't enjoy the other guy's good cricket. And of course, you could see how miserably biased and habituated the Indian press is. When India wins, it's wow, you know, when they lose, you almost always find some headline which is putting them down, especially if they lose more than once in a row. You know? If they lose twice or thrice in quick succession, then it's a big deal. It's a big post-mortem, you know. It's a big deal. And then people then we look for scapegoats, right? Who's to blame? So this is all very ridiculous, but it's operating everywhere in the world, not just in India. These are a result of habitual patterns based on ignorance, which makes us uptight and cling to our own version of things. That's what ignorance does, isn't it? It makes you tight, constricted. Your space becomes crowded. Dukkha. You can't see because there's no space. You can't see the beauty of the New Zealanders 6. For you, it's suffering. Even though they're losing. If they score a 6, it could be suffering. Even though you're going to win the match. Isn't that amazing?
We just got it thought that this India lost. So the same action of Virat Kohli giving a flying kiss to his wife.
Giving
Giving a flying kiss to his
flying
wife,
kiss to his wife, yeah.
have been decoded as that she was responsible for the loss because and because now they have won, now people are celebrating how good husband is. So
Yeah.
Thank you for letting that inside.
If they had lost, then they made such a big deal about Kohli missing a catch. He missed a catch, and it was very funny to watch in slow motion as well. And they would have excoriated him for that, flayed him for that. You know, we like slaying people in our media. It's a very horrible word, slay or grill. They don't use slay. Yeah. Anyway, so this is our life. Yeah, one habitual pattern after another. The way we eat, the time we eat. One family member I asked them, you know, are you hungry when you eat? I don't know. I said, no, I'm not usually hungry when I eat. Why are you eating? I didn't say that. Why? It's very clear why we eat. It's a habitual pattern. You eat 3 times a day because we're a particular caste. We're not poor. We're not fasting. We're not very religious. So we don't fast. We eat 3 times a day. It's a habit, even when we're not hungry, even if it's making us sick. We won't read the things on Google that explain how it makes us sick. We'll read things on Google which reinforce our point of view about things. This is all habit. But the worst habit, of course, is the habit of clinging to oneself as a real I, me, mine. That's the worst habit because everything else comes out of that, right? And we truly believe there is a me and I, which is what makes people so self-conscious. When you're in front of people, you know, you feel I. Immediately we feel I, there's a separation. Right? I and other. And so then the habitual patterns kick in. This habitual pattern of trying to protect oneself, not make a fool of oneself, make people think one is good, or whatever. So it's all a play of habitual patterns based on dependent arisings. Obviously, there are causes, conditions. As Guru Rinpoche Padmasambhava says in one text, samsara is impure dependent arising. So this impure dependent arising is creating all these habits. Another way of looking at it, the easy one, really, we keep on acting in a certain way in the past, so we'll keep on acting in that way. It's so simple. But it's good also because if we continue to be generous and continue to watch our mind as we're told to, that will become a very useful habit. I many times have wished I had thought more before I'd open my mouth. This happens quite a lot with me. So that's a habit of talking too much. Here, of course, I usually talk sense because I'm Tushita, sitting higher than people and recording this talk, so I have to speak some sense. But sometimes, yeah, things escape my mouth which are not useful. And then later one says, oh, then it's too late. So that's a habit. And then there are people who are very, very dignified with their speech. Whenever they open their mouth, you pay attention. And that's because they've really controlled their habit of all the 4 negative kinds of speech. And whenever they speak, it is like this guy Yu Hunt at the UN, very dignified. People listen. We had this, people listen to people usually who speak good sense and have good karma of speech through good habits of speech. As we mentioned in the section on karma last month or whatever it was, if you have a history of lying in past lives, even if you speak the truth in this life, often people won't believe you because of that karmic residue from the past when you lied. Well, not if you lied just once in your life, but if you regularly lied, in this life, of course, also people will stop believing you if they begin to see how you're lying. And people stop believing us. But often people do believe liars because they are very truthful in their past lives. They believe liars. And very good people who speak the truth, they are not believed because in their past life they were liars. This is how karma works, apparently. So we have to be very careful of our habitual patterns. Some habits are just so deeply ingrained, it's hard to give up. And of course, we have the habit of being uptight. Someone says just something, a little bit, it's a big deal because we have the habit of self-grasping, grasping at me who is this, that, and the other, right? I'm this, I'm that, I'm intelligent. So, that also becomes a habit to think that one is this or one is that. Any feedback? This is very simple stuff, but very important. Habitual patterns ruin our lives. Some of them, some habitual patterns ruin our life. And in the end, we have to go beyond patterns and experience the spaciousness and the direct insight of emptiness and so forth, which creates a very different kind of awareness. To put it in very crude language. Yeah. Oh boy, I wish I had a double, double cup, double Americano or something. What's the one which is black? Black coffee is Americano. Not that I like it, but it would keep me awake. Sorry. Why am I sleepy? Well, also habit. The habit of taking a rest in the afternoon. Today I didn't get that rest. It's been a busy day right through. So then now there's the manifestation of yawning and laziness. But if someone put, my favorite food in front of me, I'd immediately become very awake. So this is again habit of being addicted to sense pleasures like food. That makes me wake up or a good coffee. Any feedback? Neil, Apurva, Apollina, Klaus, Apollina.
Kabirji, any tips on how to get rid of our bad habits? I mean,
No
we
tip.
understand how they can harm us and all that, but I can't even give up my morning tea.
Neither can I.
People say have, so
We're in good company. So if you find out how to give it up, tell me. There are no tips. The tips are in these books. The airport books have the tips. 6 tips for this, 10 tips to, do this or that. No, the tip is that there's no tip, but habits are connected with self grasping ignorance. That seems to be the key. So if we can begin to work with this very strong sense of I, of course, there are practical things we can do, right? We can have a slightly smaller cup of tea, which I'm experimenting with. It's not very successful so far. Having a smaller cup of tea, so you don't drink so much. Theoretically, you could get down to, 10 mm or something, although it sounds foolish. But, if you start with a big mug, then you work slowly, decreasing. Maybe that would work a little bit. Raisins on hand. This also, I have some nuts and raisins on hand. You can chew a few nuts and raisins. That's healthier than just having tea. Or another thing, which is a real godsend in a way, just put a few tea leaves, very few, into the pot and experiment with that. Just at least you have the habit of having something which has the label tea. It won't be as tasty as your milk tea or whatever, but it will do for a while. I did that yesterday, and it lasted until mid-morning. Pretty good, huh? Then I had to go upstairs and get milk from my auntie, I have to confess, to make a milk tea. But you can experiment and then understand that, of course, is just a stopgap measure, like a Band-Aid. What helps us long-term get rid of habits is to, I suppose it makes sense to say, infuse the mind with so much dharma practice that the 8 worldly dharmas, including wanting tea all the time, just become meaningless. And one has the energy to overcome them because one realizes how they're just interfering with our health, taking up time, and that, plain water or something simpler is perfectly good enough. You know what I mean? But it's a very good
Yes,
example.
yes, Kabir.
Tea, you see, tea, you and I have been having every morning of our life, basically. So that's how many mornings, 365 times, in my case, a lot of years. That's a big habit, the morning one only. And then there's the mid-morning one and the one between the morning and the mid-morning one, whatever it is. That's a lot of tea. That's a lot of habit, right? That's a lot of habitual action. So it's not going to go away quickly, like people who chain smoke. They can't just give it up just like that. But slowly, and then having an alternative, having an antidote initially. And then, of course, when we have a lot of bodhicitta and realization of dependent arising, emptiness, then, of course, that whole, biscuit. Sagar is trying to help me with a biscuit. This, for our friends in Mexico and Greece, this is a Britannia biscuit. So that's a habitual pattern. We got rid of the British, how many years ago? 1947. 53 plus 28, 23. Kitne saal ho gaye? 76, is it? 76 years ago, we got rid of the British. We're still calling our biscuits Britannia. Yeah, and that is Latin, of course. That's a Latin word. So we're stuck in the past in our country. The British ate these biscuits with milk tea. Nandita, I don't know what you have your milk tea with. So anyway, I've been given a biscuit to eat, but it's better as an example of a habitual pattern. Yeah, and so many Indian people, probably, I'm sure 50% or more, have morning tea with a biscuit, many of which will have been produced by the Britannia company, even though the British left so long ago. So, what does that say? I don't know. It says we're conditioned, right? Can't even change the name of that company to, I don't know, maybe it will change the Bharat biscuits, Anyway, my friends, this is what happens, you see, with habitual patterns. It's, yeah, it can be humorous. It can be, of course, they can be beneficial, like, having your turmeric tea in the morning, or your tulsi tea, holy basil, or your herbal tea in the morning could be fantastic, But right now, for me, a lot of them taste like dishwater, so I'm not very interested in them. But that's my own bad conditioning, I admit. But one has to, create some good habits, or else one will die young, and so forth.
Usually I just shared with Sadhu.
Please, you want to share something?
I just shared with Sadhu that yesterday I had tea.
You had a tea at 3 a.m. at night. What are you doing up at 3 a.m.? Studying. Okay, so our resident volunteer Tushita studies at 3 a.m. So I guess we might take a vote and say that is a good habit or not. I don't know. I guess it's a good habit. But what time do you wake up then? 10 a.m. or something? Okay, pretty good. So anyway, habits, we have to watch them. And recently in Bodh Gaya, one very well-known teacher, he emphasized this in his simple talk. He spoke about habits, realizing how drastic it is, how important it is to be aware of our habitual patterns, especially the negative ones. We may have a habit of just having nasty, worrying thoughts or nasty thoughts about someone again and again. That's also a habitual pattern. And just because we don't act it out doesn't mean that it's not having a powerful effect on our minds, disturbing our peace, and creating the cause to, in the future, maybe say something or do something harmful. So even having those kind of thoughts again and again could have a pattern of lustful thoughts, jealous thoughts, pride, thoughts of pride, how superior we are to everyone because we can speak English properly or whatever. There's many habitual patterns which are not useful can arise. Yeah.
From your perspective, what is the difference between these habits and the OCD that people have? Sometimes
Other what?
Obsessive compulsive disorder that people have.
Obsessive compulsive is just, isn't that just a very severe form of a habit based on, again, the dependent arising? The cause there would be some deeper, for that person, a deeper trauma or pain or grief or hurt that they've experienced in that life, or that would explain. I mean, because I saw that in my household, and I am guessing that it's caused by something the person is not expressing. The emotional life is distorted in some way, some grief or fear or something has been suppressed. That seems very obvious, and it creates this compensatory kind of behavior to mask the pain or the hurt. It's a compensatory activity, isn't it? It takes your mind off something very unsettling, painful. This is how maybe one interpretation of those things. So yeah, it's a very disturbing habit but it all comes back, of course, to the self-grasping ignorance, to the clinging. Oh boy, excuse me, yawning at 5 to 8, not good. So, habitual patterns. What else? Of course, the 8 worldly dharmas become habitual patterns, being addicted to praise, good reputation, pleasure, gain, being so upset at lack of comfort or people disrespecting us or bad reputation or losing something. These are all habits. These are habits of mind.
Recognition of these habits, Kabirji, can also give us a lot of insights in our own samsara, right?
Yeah. If we're aware of them, yeah, absolutely. By stopping habitual patterns, we can appreciate the real world on the spot. That's a powerful statement. He seems to be saying that if we have habitual patterns, we're never really in the here and now. We're all just engaged in an automatic pattern that's playing out. Whereas if we have this awareness of being really on the spot, on the dot, then how can a habitual pattern operate if you are firmly, squarely in the present moment, he seems to be saying. Anyway, he's saying by stopping habitual patterns, we can appreciate the real world on the spot. We can appreciate the bright, beautiful, fantastic world around us. We don't have to feel all that resentful or embarrassed. If we don't negate our habitual patterns, we can never fully appreciate the world. Once we overcome habitual patterns, the vividness of, anyway, he's discussing something in this chapter which will take too long to, he speaks of Drala. Drala principle refers to the natural energies of the universe, the natural energies that manifest. So he's saying habitual patterns cut out that ability to contact the energy, the bright energy of the world, you could say. Once we overcome habitual patterns, the vividness of these principles can descend on us, the magic can descend on us, the ordinary magic, if you like, of the world. And we will begin to be individual masters of our world. Yeah, how can we be a master of our world if we're just governed by habitual patterns? We can't be. Habitually getting angry, habitually being moody, habitually being, grasping, habitually being bitchy and nasty, or whatever, worried, or, whatever. How can we appreciate our world or be useful to others? We'll be a pain in the neck to others, Or some people habitually just talk. Don't listen to the other person. That happens, no? People like me, talk. When I go home, I don't talk so much, by the way. Other people talk. I'm schizophrenic. At home, I'm someone else. No, not totally. But they don't allow me to sit on a cushion higher than them and preach to them. Ghar ka murga dal barabar. Yeah. Which is good. We shouldn't have fantasies, go home and start preaching to auntie and cousin. They'll say, are you crazy? Shut up and just eat your food. So, yeah, habitual patterns. We have to, if we're not watching, they just take over. They take over. Okay, so it's 8 o'clock. I stayed awake for an hour and a half. I did pretty good. I said I didn't have my siesta today. And I have a good excuse. I'm not 30 or 40 years old, much more. So young people maybe don't need a siesta, but as you get older, you need one. Of course, it can become a habit. Some 70, 80-year-olds don't need a siesta, but us younger people sometimes do. Again, it can just be a habit. And sometimes one can see it's a habit by not giving into it, by doing something else, and then one can just get on with something else. You don't have to. So I think with that morning tea, Nandita, why don't you eat an orange? You love oranges. Why don't you substitute morning tea for some orange or an orange juice? It's not easy, I know, even though you like oranges. It would be interesting. It would be very interesting. It is interesting to watch the mind where you're not giving it what it's used to at a particular time. It's very interesting and painful, actually, to watch the mind scream and shout and say that you want it. But there are ways to bypass it by just getting on with something else, intently and attentively. And of course, have some substitute, have some water or hot water or something, or some tea leaves to give a little bit of that, but good quality tea leaves, and then it's actually not bad for you. Black tea, if it's good quality leaf and not too strong, said to be good for you. But again, that could just be habitual lying of the tea companies. I'm not sure, but I'm told that it's quite good. It defeats the free radicals who are all running around making a mess of our bodies. So yeah, the free radicals they don't like some of these things. So any last minute mentions of anything? We have to be on our guard. Okay,
Kapilji, with habits, I just thought the first one is to recognize our bad habits and how they are trapping us. And the second, from what you said about tea, the tips, some of the tips that I was asking for. I think what you were saying was dilute the habit slowly. I mean,
yeah, dilute it. Yes, that's good.
yeah.
Like if you
So
have a
that's what I
very,
wanted to mention.
like a drinker has a very stiff whiskey, maybe half an inch of whiskey in the glass and 1 inch of water, then cut it down to, quarter of an inch of whiskey and the same amount of water, then add more water, then cut down the whiskey. I'm not speaking from experience, by the way. I've never liked whiskey. I used to drink cider in England in pubs, apple cider. And now I very occasionally have a rum with water, but not a stiff rum. And I'm not addicted to it. I don't take it every day, once a month maybe. So don't worry, the teacher is not an alcoholic. So yeah, you cut it, dilute it, or try another drink, for heaven's sake. You can make a tasty drink with crushed black peppercorns, kali mirch, cardamom, and some tulsi, and some ginger, and some honey or jaggery. Actually, that's a good idea. I'm gonna maybe try that tomorrow. What a good advice I'm giving myself, and see if that works. You still have to make some effort because the habit of having a particular kind of tea will be strong. Because we have the image, isn't it, Nandita? The image comes in the mind first, isn't it? And then
Exactly.
image comes, you immediately, there's this craving, yeah? Then the craving comes. You can understand why craving is often given as the cause of suffering. We really want it. It's like we can't do anything properly before we have made that tea, right? You have the same experience?
Yes, Kabirji. I cannot begin my day without that cup
Right,
of
and you
tea.
have someone else in the same club. So you see, we have to give a substitute there, a healthier one. And then that habit also one day will have to be given up in the sense that it won't matter if we have it or not. Of course, if it's healthy, then it's good to have it, right? But it shouldn't become a habit. Like if you're traveling on the Rajdhani or something and you can't make that even in 1 AC, you can't make tea like that. The pantry car won't allow you to go in and make tea, even if you're in 1 AC. So some days we won't get what we want in the morning, right? Or if you have to get up early and go to the airport, you're not going to get the kind of tea you necessarily want. So it's good to experiment so that we're more flexible, less uptight. Everything is a problem because of our uptightness, from self-grasping ignorance, wanting something for me, for I, thinking, what will I do if I don't get it, isn't it? There's that feeling, isn't it? If I don't get my morning tea, then there's that question. Can I handle it, right? Have you had that kind of sense?
Yes,
Kabirji.
Kabirji.
If I don't get this, then how will I carry on my day? How will I live my life? So there's that image of the tea. There's that kind of anxiety in the back of the mind. So actually it's very fruitful to see this and how the self-cherishing mind, the self-grasping ignorance is holding on to these thoughts and this, which we wouldn't need to do if there was a sense of space. If you're thirsty, then of course, if we're thirsty, drink some water, We're not saying stop drinking anything, of course. We drink what's necessary, but we wouldn't have that overwhelming urge to have a coffee or tea or whatever. There's plenty of people in the coffee camp, right? They can't start their day without a coffee. The French probably can't start their day without coffee, or used to anyway. I don't know about the Mexicans and the others here. How do Mexicans start their day? Klaus, do you have to have something in the morning if you're ordinary habitual Mexican? What do you do in the morning?
Coffee and bread.
Coffee and bread. There you go. You see. So, but I mean, immediately after you wake up, do people, they wouldn't want it immediately, right? We Indians want it immediately.
Well,
Yeah,
some people do coffee.
yeah,
Some.
yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're all human beings and all basically the same, I suppose. So we all have this habitual pattern. And anyway, I've been repeating myself now. This is what we need to work with. And the arrogance in the title we've been using, arrogance was used to mean this arrogance of the self-grasping, holding on to I very powerfully and someone very important. So if I is so important in the world, then of course what I want, what I need is very important. And that becomes a habitual pattern. I need this, I don't want that, etc., etc. Yeah. Okay, so we'll continue with this on Sunday morning. Meanwhile, yeah, it can be useful to watch our mind and see, watch our habits and see how we are kind of governed by them. And some, as we said, very useful, good habits, some not so. I mean, like if you have a habit of brushing your teeth every morning, then one would say that is a very useful habit. You know? Even Dharma practitioners who are at a high level probably brush their teeth, even though it's a habit. It's a good habit, which becomes spontaneous. Yeah. Of course, in another sense, think that you're learning to ride a bicycle, so you have to make the habit of getting up and trying to ride a bicycle, even though sometimes you get hurt. After a while, it's like it's no longer a habit, is it? It's just something very spontaneous. You can ride the bicycle. You don't have to have a habit of watching this or watching that or trying to remember some instruction. It just becomes very spontaneous and spacious. So maybe life can become like that one day when we're no longer worried about this or that or the falling off the bicycle. It just becomes so natural. Life becomes very natural and easy. And the space of the mind becomes less crowded and more spacious and less I at the center of everything, less ego. So we can dedicate for that we attain that kind of spacious mind, which is not uptight, but also not to beat ourselves up for having habits, but just to work with them skillfully. We're not here to make ourselves feel worse. Although some teachers say that the Dharma should make us feel worse for a while. They do say that. Like good medicine should, in some cases, make us feel worse because it brings out the disease, doesn't suppress the disease. So good medicine can make us feel worse initially, but then later it cures us. So anyway, may we be very mindful and vigilant. May the teachings, which are the source of, it is said, the source of lasting happiness, last in this world system for a very long time. May the great teachers and masters who uphold the teachings have long and healthy lives, and may all their wishes be fulfilled. May, if it's useful for us, may we have long and healthy lives to actualize, integrate the Dharma into our lives. May the precious mind of love, compassion, bodhicitta arise in our minds. And may we have the good fortune to receive and put into practice more and more teachings on the great Mahashunyata, great emptiness, seeing things as they are, rather than in our hallucinated view of them. May the wars, the famine, the diseases in the world quickly come to an end. And may people think of benefiting one another. May people, cease to be governed or slaves of their anger and begin to see the truth of how everybody wants to be happy, doesn't want to suffer. May Tushita Center, all the centers teaching Dharma in the world and be successful. May their activities grow. May all the centers receive the support they need to carry on in a beneficial way for others. All the Dharma members of Tushita, all the centers, be well and happy. All Dharma wishes be fulfilled. May those who are sick or ill, lonely, or bereft of Dharma find what they need. May they find medicine, companions, the Dharma, whatever they need for their temporal and lasting happiness. And I would like to add that may we in India recognize the greatness of our tradition, and may Buddhism flourish even more and more in the land of its birth, and more Indian students take up serious study and meditation and become excellent teachers of the Dharma. So we don't have to rely always on foreign scholars and teachers. While appreciating, of course, all of the foreign scholars and teachers who have helped us and inspired us so much, and will continue to do so, and will be welcome to do so. Thus, may we in India also develop this kind of enthusiasm that some of the Westerners show by studying 15, 20 years in Tibetan monastic institutions, becoming excellent teachers as a result. May we Indians also engage in this. Okay, so thank you all very much for your patience, and maybe see some of you on Sunday. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh.